Test. Okay, so these are the mics. It's just, so one is for you, Professor Rin, and then you both will share one mic. Something goes wrong. Just keep it on, because sometimes when you close it and turn it on, you've seen it, right? Yeah. So, and for you and Faisal, this is the clicker to use for your slides later. We will display it during, just press next and point it to the camera. We will, last question. Okay, so that's fine. So we'll be fast. Gotcha. Sorry?
I didn't bring any notes. It's fine. I want to be relaxed and responsive.
Same here. I said some numbers here in case I didn't forget.
Okay, everyone, let's begin our next session, which will be the first panel discussion of the day, delving into the topic, Humanizing Sustainability Through Behavioral Change and Education. In this session, we'll explore how achieving sustainability requires more than just structural and policy changes. It involves reshaping the way individuals, communities, and societies think, act, and make decisions about our environment. Through education, behavioral change, and innovative technologies, we can envision a future where sustainable practices seamlessly become part of our daily lives. We are privileged to have a distinguished group of experts joining us today. Let me introduce our esteemed panelists, Mr. Jeffrey Yong, Principal Advisor at the Financial Stability Institute, Bank of International Settlements, Mr. Sergio Venegas Marin, Economist at the World Bank Group, Mr. Bei Meng Yi, Director for Sustainability at the Singapore Environment Council, Ms. Farel Han, Education Program Specialist at the UNESCO Regional Office Bangkok, Professor Adjunct Wan Faiza Chedin, Chief Executive Officer of Amanah Lestari Alam. And guiding this important discussion is our esteemed moderator, Professor Dr. Surinder Kaur Anak Perempuan Chanan Singh, Dean of the Faculty of Language and Linguistics, University Malaya. Without further ado, let's welcome our panelists and give a round of applause.
Thank you very much. Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, both those here physically as well as those online. I'd like to welcome you to the panel on Humanizing Sustainability Through Behavioral Change in Education. I'm Surin, and I think my panel has already been introduced, so I won't go into that, because we will be short of time. So what I'll do is just focus on some of the things that we want to talk about. But my panel is very, very diverse. They come from banking, they come from community engagement, they also come from education. So there will be a very interesting, enlightening discussion going on from here. So before we start, I'd like to thank the members of the panel for agreeing to be on this panel to share your time and valuable insights with all of us. Let me contextualize the discussion before we start. I'd like to talk about some alarming statistics that show our incredibly unsustainable practices. So the nature of our current practices is very unsustainable. Food waste. Globally, around 1.3 billion tons of food, which is roughly 1/3 of all food produced, is wasted annually. On the other hand, water use and stress. Globally, we use about 70% of fresh water withdrawals for agriculture. Malaysia uses 40 to 50% of water for agriculture, industrial, and domestic purposes. And this is, quite high. Malaysia's average consumption is 201 liters per capita per day, according to our Commission for Water Services, SPAN, right? And this is, if you think about mineral water bottles and things like that, that's 134 bottles of mineral water per day, all right? So this is higher than the recommended value of the World Health Organization, which is only 165. So we're looking at quite a huge difference, very unsustainable practices. So having contextualized this and set the scene, so to speak, a lot of this has to do with some things that we want to ask, some crucial questions. So how do we ensure that sustainability is humanized? How do we ensure that it's relatable and actionable to diverse populations, to get people to integrate it into our daily lives without having to think that I have to do this, I have to do that. It should come naturally, right? So then this leads us to another obvious question, which is, what is the role of education in driving behavioral change, which can support long-term sustainable practices? So these are some of the things that we will need to talk about. How can climate literacy not just drive behavioral change, but address the knowledge gap, allow us to have informed climate-related decision-making, climate-informed decision-making. So these are just some of the areas of discussion today that we will explore. So without further ado, let's start. I'd like to start by asking the first question, and perhaps, Sergey, I would like to start with you. The World Bank has published several reports on climate education, where you yourself have been part of those publications. I've read Choosing Our Future, Education for Climate Action, where the World Bank stresses that education holds the key to foster to faster and better climate action. So my question to you is, how does the World Bank envision climate education, climate literacy, and how does it try to bridge the gap between knowledge and behavioral change?
Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. I'm always happy to talk about this topic because I feel like it doesn't get enough traction. I mean, it's COP29. The first time that education had its day was last COP. So it took 28 COPs to actually have a space for us to have this discussion. So very happy that we're here. With that said, it's true that we published this report, Choosing Our Future. We like to start by highlighting the reality that for many youth, and I see many in this room, there is a lot of climate anxiety about what's going to happen with the environment and the planet and what it means for their future, what's going to happen to their jobs, their employment. We keep hearing about a green economy, and it's unclear how they're going to fit into it, and even about the education that they're going to receive. We see climate shocks more frequently, closing down schools and so on, which disrupts the education they receive. So with all of this anxiety taking place, we have the risk of this anxiety turning into cynicism, into anger, and so on. But it doesn't have to be that way. We do see education as this powerful tool that, if utilized correctly, we can turn this anxiety into effective climate action. And here is where we focus the report. It's basically, what are the entry points to use education as this powerful tool? And one strong argument we make in the report is that education can be key for pro-climate behavior. And here it's important to highlight that it's not just mitigation practices like the energy that you use or the water consumption you have, but also the adaptation practices. So what it means for flood resilience, for coping with different shocks that you may experience. Because at the end of the day, from the World Bank side, a lot of the countries that we work with, they haven't done much to worsen this crisis, and yet they're feeling the consequences. So that's something that we emphasize, that education is key not just for mitigation, but also for adaptive capacity. And we know that because education is the strongest predictor of climate awareness, stronger than income, stronger than religion, stronger than political affiliation. We did some analysis that shows that for every year of education, and this is general education, it's not environmental studies or anything along those lines, for every year of education, climate awareness increases by 9 percentage points. And then we also know that that change is not in the future, it's also today. We see climate activists working today. We see that they also hold a very strong place in influencing their families and so on. So in India, we did a study where by providing students with information about climate, They were able to also convince their families on how to change their pro-climate behaviors and so on. And pro-climate attitudes by their parents increased by 13 percentage points. So they were more likely to use certain products, they were more likely to reduce their energy consumption and so on. So again, that speaks to the value of education as a tool for changing mindsets and behaviors. And I'm happy to go on and on about this. But let me
All right. Okay. Thank you about that, Sergio. So climate anxiety leading on to, World Bank promoting, fostering pro-climate practices, which actually stress more on adaptation than anything else. So that's great. You have said that the research has shown that education is one of the strongest indicators for adaptability, right? As well as change in behavioral practices. So I'd like to lead on now to Farial and your standpoint from UNESCO. Does UNESCO take a similar approach, or does it structure its approach in a slightly different way, looking at the community, looking at other aspects as well?
So, UNESCO takes diverse approaches because the priority is to respond to the priorities of the country, to align with the issues that a country is facing, and then we don't have one size that fits all. But having said that, Sergio just mentioned that after so many years of COP, last year, the Greening Education Partnership, and it's now we have a space to discuss education. And the Secretary General of the United Nations at the Transforming Education Summit, we launched the Greening Education Partnership. And this is really about enabling young learners to not just have the knowledge about climate change, but also to enable them to take action and to have the values that they need to make decisions to make a difference. So it's about greening the curriculum, because unless the policy is not aligned with the curriculum, the curriculum, the policy needs to be in alignment with each other. And then we often talk about greening curriculum, but we don't look at greening pedagogy, the pedagogical practices, empowering our teachers to actually teach about climate change. I was recently in a meeting with some teachers in Thailand, and a lot of them said, but we don't even know how to translate terms like carbon neutral societies to our local languages. So teachers need to have the awareness, and they need to be prepared to teach about climate action. And then in terms of assessments, we need alignment also with the assessments. And yesterday there was a big discussion about how perhaps large-scale assessments like PISA, but also national level assessments could start integrating issues of climate knowledge about climate, but also climate action and climate justice as part of the assessment processes. Because what is not assessed falls through the cracks, and we know that. So UNESCO is for a whole society approach, where we are looking at not just educators, but also the communities, parents, governance mechanisms that go beyond education. And this is really, we'll talk more about it in a bit, but it has to be a systemic approach. Because unless all arms of the system and the society don't move together, we cannot have we can't have transformations at society level. So education is a lever for societal transformations, but then we need the whole system to move together.
That's great. I mean, you're both absolutely correct in saying that education has taken a long, long time to take its place on this world platform. And that's really, it should have been done a long time ago. Farial, you talked about, greening pedagogical practices. You talked about taking a systemic approach. And again, you seem to echo also what Sergey is saying in terms of how important education is in awareness, and which then drives behavioral change. I'd like to lead on to perhaps a slightly more different or diverse viewpoint that Mingyi, you might have. You may want to push back on some of the things that both Sergey and Farial has brought up. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. First of all, thank you for inviting me to the Malaysia Pavilion. My family used to be from Malaysia, and coming here seems like going back home. So thank you. All right. So I have 3 points. It's not really a pushback. First point is that I totally agree with you that education is important. And at the Singapore Environment Council, we do a lot on education. We work with schools. We try to incorporate sustainability in their curriculum. We're trying to make it fun for the kids to learn about sustainability. On the corporate side, we have a lot of programs to build capacity within organizations to look at carbon, to look at the waste, and look at energy. So it's important. That goes to my second point, that it's important, but it's not sufficient. I think that many studies have shown that there is a sustainability gap. Knowing does not equate to action, and that's where it's important. So just one easy example. If you were to grab anyone outside and ask them whether recycling is the right thing to do, I'm confident everyone will say it is. But if you take a look at the recycling bins, it will give you a different picture. So we do need more than just education. And it's about incorporating sustainability in your values, more than that. And my third point is that even with individual actions, it's not good enough. And I encourage people to practice sustainability. I encourage companies to do so. But touching on your point of having systemic approach, we need often governments to come in to take the lead, and sometimes certain organizations and governments tend to hide behind education and awareness building for inaction. We tend to focus a lot on that, but not taking real actions to deliver on reducing our climate impact. So I just want to end with that.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. Interesting. I like that you said that it's important, but it's not sufficient. And I like that you said knowing doesn't equate to doing. There are two things that should go hand in hand, but don't often do that, all right? So, okay, over to that. To someone who works with the community, who engages the community in terms of both knowing and doing. So one, what is your take on this? How does Alam bridge the gap between knowing and doing? And eventually later, perhaps we can bring the government in, and how does the government then fit in or integrate with that?
Knowing and doing is not good enough. It's knowing, doing. So that means we have to know, we have to do, we have to be, and we have to live together to do this. Before I answer the rest of the question, I would like to ask, how many of you all have drank this water here at COP? Please raise your hands. Nobody else? Okay. How many of you all, please raise your hands still. How many of you all have used the bins at COP? Yeah. And how many of you all have thrown this bottle straight like that, or took the trouble to open it, this put in the glass, and this put in the aluminium? I want to see a hand. We have 2 hands here. So I do hope that at least this community here, the least you could do today, go to the bin, check all the bins, and your bottles, please put in the kaca, and this put in the aluminium. Yeah, that's my point number 1. Point number 2, when we talk about education, when we talk about community, we have to adopt different approach with different community. Alam is very new. We just started operations in 2022. I'm not in education space. I learn from the projects that we've done. Yeah? We have the first project that we did is actually with Ministry of Education, where we did a nationwide survey in school syllabus from year 1 to year 12. I mean, from standard 1 to standard 6 on the level of environmental education in school syllabus. It's not whether it's taught as a subject, but whether it's infused in the relevant subjects like mathematics, languages, etc., using the UNESCO ESD framework. The result that we found is actually, whilst in Malaysia, we do have that element of EE and ESD infused in the school syllabus, but teacher-like capacity. Yeah? So it's all about KPI. That's number 1. And number 2, what we learn actually, when it comes to my project in Royal Belum, where we have the indigenous people, I have to change the whole syllabus. Instead of teaching them A is apple, B is boy, because we are educating the preschoolers there. They've never seen apple in their entire life. They've never been out of the country, out of the jungle. So we have to use the shape of your house, that's A. How the leaf look, that is P. And then even counting, they know this is fingers 5, they do not know the context of 5. So we had to use the leaves that have 1 point, that is 1. And then we ask them to go around, take the other leaves that has 2, 3 points, then they know, oh, it's all about sounds and sights. Yeah? And the third one, we talk about policy. Yeah? In Malaysia, on education side, the Ministry of Education, based on the survey that Alam did, has already, alhamdulillah, took our survey and looking into the next 10-year education blueprint. What's good about it, they are actually mobilizing the industry players, the teachers, those who are working on this to help them bottoms up on how to make this more sustainable. And on the Ministry of Higher Learning, they are looking at life learning, flexible education on this. I can go on, but I'll touch that later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. The mic seems to be malfunctioning. Very good points. One, I noticed the theme here. We started off with knowing and awareness, and then we moved on to doing, and now we're adding on another dimension to it, being. So it's something that we need to be, it has to be integrated into ourselves, and it should be something that we take for granted. It should come naturally. That's really good. And I also like your 2 points where you agreed with Farial and the others that it has to be diverse approaches, different approaches for different communities, as well as building capacity. Now, when we talk about building capacity, I'd like to turn to Jeff, because there are different approaches for different communities. And obviously, Jeff, coming from the financial community, what is the approach? And how do you envision climate education?
Thanks, Rui, for the invitation. Happy to be here, and I'm happy to be back in the Malaysian pavilion. I'm Malaysian. So I'm from the Bank for International Settlements. I guess I'm kind of like the odd one out here. Although I'm not involved in education, I'm involved in capacity building. So I co-chair a task force on capacity building within what we call the Network for Greening the Financial System at the NGFS. It is a coalition of around 130 central banks and financial authorities, including Bank Negara. In fact, my co-chair is from Bank Negara, Madalena. And what we have done is we have developed a curriculum for central banks and financial regulators on how they can set up climate training within their institutions. So in the central banking and the financial regulatory world, I guess we are a few steps behind in the sense that we are still at the stage, many institutions are still at the stage of raising awareness on why climate change is an issue for central banks, why climate change is an issue for financial regulators. We know that this COP is a finance COP. Central banks have a role to support that within their mandates. And one of the sort of stumbling block, and here I'm picking up the Benji's point about that education and capacity building is not the only thing available. For us, it's important that there's clarity in the mandates of central banks on why this is an issue for them, for financial stability. And so the clarity from a policy perspective is very important. And we take a broader approach when we use the term capacity building. It's not just formal training like seminars and online courses, but also on-the-job training, secondments, because central banks, we are not climate specialists. But yet we need to know what does a 2 degree, 1.5 degree means, and the risk transmission channel back to the financial system. So this link between climate science and in the financial industry is very important. And here we need to work with the academia, we need to work with the scientific community to get that knowledge. And coming back to the theme of this panel, humanizing education, what it really means in terms of natural catastrophe and how that impact insurance availability. How can banks support lending to sustainable practices, and what are the risks? As regulators, we are very much focused on the risks. So this is making it real in the central banking context. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jeff. So you brought up the financial aspect, you brought up capacity building and things like that, and I'm struck by a couple of things. Farial, you mentioned that the teachers said, we don't even have the words to use in the language. And then the banking industry has a different set of linguistic tools. The World Bank probably another. And, communities, the environmental groups all have different sets of linguistic tools that go into this. So building on that, all right, I'd like to ask a question. The first thing, and we'd like to go on to the second part of our discussion where we talk about humanizing sustainability. So how do we unpack the whole notion of what does it mean to humanize sustainability? Because at the end of the day, the social actors that are part of this are the human beings, right? And so if the human beings don't even understand what's being said to them, how are they going to put in place behavioral change? So this is something that we like to put on, and that's one. And two, the other issue of being. How do we get that into ourselves? Because it's not just learning, it's also being. So I'd like to perhaps start with you, Mengyi, on this, if you have any ideas. Yeah.
So humanizing sustainability, it's a really big word, right? It's actually before coming to this event, I actually checked GPT it. But it's not very relevant. So we had a discussion yesterday on this, and I think the definition really depends on the context they're coming from. So in my opinion, humanizing sustainability is about integrating sustainability practices in your daily lives without even knowing it. So I think that's the most ideal case. So I shared an example about electric vehicles, about Tesla. And I'm sure most people who buy a Tesla is not buying a Tesla because it's green. Most people like its functionality, likes the design. And I thought that is how we should be humanizing sustainability. We want people to embrace sustainability, not because it's good for our environment. Yes, it is good for our environment, but because it enhances their lifestyle. So there are a lot of discussion internationally about degrowth or about having sustainable consumption. I feel that we can do both. We can have a good quality of life and have sustainability incorporated in it. But it requires at a national level or the global level to have the right incentive in place that drives companies to design their products better, to design, put certain costs or incentive at the right place so that people and companies are encouraged to incorporate this in their operations, in their products.
Thank you. So you talk about intuitively integrating sustainability practices into our daily lives, buying a Tesla for its functionality, so on and so forth. And it's also because it's cool. It's the thing to buy a Tesla these days. And if we do that, and in a way, on our own, we are contributing to some sustainable practices. But over to you, Sergey. Looking at the right incentive in place, how would you define that? How would you unpack that? What kind of right incentives do people need to change, their practices?
Yep. I think it goes back a little bit to what we were talking about before. It's about I like the point you made about awareness is not action. And even if it is, individual action is not enough. and then you were talking about the example of recycling. Even if there is a policy, people may not follow it. When you agree with it, it doesn't. Maybe the incentives are not there for you to stop and take the time to like get rid of the cup before you put it in the bin. And that speaks to the fact that we're all humans, and yeah, it's hard to be 100% present at every given point. But what's important about humanizing, I think, sustainability and so on, is the reality that we are here at COP and we're making very ambitious commitments. And for too long, those commitments haven't taken into account that it will be people that will have to follow through with those commitments. By that, I mean, you will need people to support them. You will need people to implement them. At the end of the day, it was humans that caused this problem, and it will have to be humans that solve it. And that was missing. And I think that's something that we have to keep front and center. It's true that climate awareness is not the solution necessarily, but it's a precondition. If you don't have the climate awareness, you're less likely to support ambitious policies like the dropping of energy subsidies and so on. So you may have a very strong position from the government on the way we're going to follow through on the emissions is to reduce our energy reliance on coal, but if then people feel the impact on their pockets and they don't agree with it, you will see a reversal 3 years down the line. So having an understanding by people of why that policy is in place is critical. It's not sufficient, but without it, the support for that policy won't be there. And without the skills for people to actually implement that transition, you just won't see the change. So I think 28 COPs and not a lot of change. And I think we have a lot of plans, but they're not getting implemented. And I think it's because we keep missing the point that it's about people. And people sometimes, even when they agree, they need the incentives from the government, and then people need the incentives from themselves to follow through on making it easy, accessible, and so on, making the decisions easy for them. But all of that takes planning, and yeah, the complexity of the human mind cannot be understated.
Absolutely right. You do say a lot of interesting things here that, humans cause problems, humans need to solve the problems. And leading on to that, you also made some very, very pertinent points. Maybe I'd like to ask Farial to respond to some of the things that Sergey has said, in terms of how is it that humans need to be given a structure, but that structure is not enough. You need the buy-in from the humans as well. From people as well, from populations.
Yes, we are saying, yes, humans have caused the problem, and then we are saying they need to solve it. But how do we bring this about? We are living in very uncertain times. We are living at times when we have climate shocks, we have flooding, schools are closing because of the temperature rises, and we are also, look at the conflict in the Middle East, look at, what's happening in Ukraine. These things make a difference. And young learners, I think they need to have resilience. It's a balancing act. It really has to be a balancing act. We are dealing with a very uncertain future. Our present times are uncertain. Our future is uncertain. And how do we then enable young people? And I think we need a new social contract for education. And this is about preparing. Because if we want human beings as humans, we need to begin right from the early years. And we need to learn to live with each other peacefully, but we also need to live with our planet and with nature peacefully and with a balance. It's a balancing act. So to do this, I think education can help shape behaviors. Education helps shape behaviors in many ways. At the community level, you can, choose to volunteer. You were speaking about, different programs where, young activism. Somebody mentioned activism. So through education, we can teach learners, or we can discuss how learners can participate in their communities and contribute, but they can also make decisions about governance or political decisions, like who to vote for, how do they, because I see at COP there are quite a few politicians here, and political decision making needs, it's juggling the different interest groups, and whose interest groups do you really support? So this is really, so learners need to learn how to be politically active, make decisions, contribute to their societies, and also contribute to governance and decision making. So these are some of the ways that education helps shape behaviors. And I think starting right from the early levels, going all the way through, we can, it's a slow process. I never learned these things when I was in school.
Yeah.
I'm learning them now. And I think we can now offer our younger generations a head start.
Okay, thank you. At the risk of sounding a little bit doom and gloom, I mean, it's really idealistic to say we need to learn to live in peace with each other and with the planet. We've been trying for aeons. We haven't seemed to have reached that sweet balance of trying to get that, all right? And also learners need to, put into place. Activism needs to come in and so on. All very well, but then there are consequences for activism as well. There are consequences for not... when you're living in a conflict zone, the last thing on your mind is sustainability. Really, you're focused on survival, right? So these are some of the things that you did put out. Maybe Faiza, you want to pick up something, from either Mengi or Sergey or Farial and take it up from your experience with Alam and put it into.
Alam was created with the intention to create awareness on environment through education, as well as instilling whistleblowing cultures with a long-term vision of mindset transformation.
Yeah.
Our behavior need to change. When we talk about that, we have, since mindset transformation, we have 3 age group that we focus on. The 13-year-old and below is all about nurturing. That's how we work with the Ministry of Education. The youth group is no longer about education. It's about empowering them. It's about climate action. We have program where we provide grant. We collaborated with UNDP to provide grant from 2,000 ringgit. That means we allow individual youth who cannot afford to do some simple project within their homes, all the way up to 100,000 for universities extra. Yep. And we empower youth to plant mangroves. To date, we've planted 10,000 within that 2.5 years in our existence. When it comes to adults, the gone case, the there, the not there, we took different approach in dealing with different organization, with the academia, for example. It's all about the academia doing seminars, teaching the students, teaching the corporates, etc. We've collaborated with 15 academias to date nationwide in Malaysia. We've collaborated with corporations doing pocket talks. We do not teach about sustainability. We teach about what I showed you just now. We show real example. Yeah. We also bring in small NGOs who are working on various organizations. Dato', if we can show the Rimau around. We work with small organization that looks at protecting Rimau. We profile them, yeah? And we also use, performing arts. Yeah? Performing arts, where we collaborated with UST Malaya, top scientists there, on seagrass. Yeah? To educate, seagrass is like what? How many times? 3 times 30, 15 times more powerful when it comes to carbon capture. After I talk to you today, maybe by the time you go home, you will have forgotten it after all, But when we did that through performing arts, some of the people are still talking about it now. They remember. And then some of the comments that people commented, you go into the theatre stupid, you come out intelligent. Whatever that we do, like what one of my trustees always mention, in Malay we call it niat kena betul. That means your intention must be right. You must do it from your heart. If you do it from your heart, doesn't matter where you go in other organizations, doesn't matter what KPI that your bosses give you, you will push for it to make sure that it is the right thing to do. Okay. Thank you.
Brilliant. That's wonderful. Mindset transformation, culture change, and I love the idea of bringing the performing arts in because that resonates with people in a way that, reading a pamphlet or a brochure doesn't. You're more likely to bin that and ruin your own sustainable practices. But you take back things and you remember stuff by the cultural aspects. And
I just add one more point, just on policy. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sure. In Malaysia, our central bank and our Securities Commission work together to form JC3, that means Joint Climate Change Committee, where our central bank works for the financial market, our banking sector, to make sure that the taxonomy are there. And then at the same time on the corporates, because SME is lacking, but our central bank works with the public listed company, giving similar deadlines for the whole value chain to follow, so that SME will comply eventually. So there is actually a top-down approach from the policy side and from the private sector side. We have several samples of projects that is public sector too.
Right. Thank you, Yvonne. Building on that, perhaps, you said a lot, and we will take time for us to unpack a lot of these things. However, but building on that, where policy is concerned, working with the central bank, what kinds of things, strategies that can be used to humanize sustainability? Am I putting you on a spot here?
No. So to humanize sustainability in central banks and financial authorities, you need to talk the central banking talk. So to make it real for central banks, you need to explain things on why it matters. So, for example, the 2 hurricanes that we saw in the United States has never been captured in any risk models. So this is this such climate change related events will continue to occur more frequently and in a more severe manner. And that can impact banks, that can impact insurance companies, and that's how it will impact the mandates of central banks and financial authorities, and that's why they need to care about it. So when it comes to training in central banks, I guess this is where we pick up from the formal education. So education does not stop when someone leaves the school or university, they join the profession, and here within the central banking community, we also need to continue this learning curve. And what central banks can do is to come up with a very structured approach. First of all, to explain from the basics, because we are not climate specialists. So first, we need to understand what is climate change. And this is where, in the course that I run from my Financial Stability Institute, the first session is always a climate scientist coming to present what is climate change. We start from the basics. What does 1.5? Why are we talking about 1.5 degrees? So central banks do not know that. So you need to start from the very basics and then make it real. What does it mean when it goes to 2 degree? What does it mean for the transmission to banks? What does it mean for this climate finance, mobilizing private capital, and how banks can support mobilizing private capital to finance green projects? There are risks involved, and therefore financial authorities need to understand that. So making it real, speaking the language, that's how I think humanizing means in central banking.
Brilliant. You brought up a really important point, and this again, Farial has brought it up, and so has Sergey and Mengi. In fact, all of you have brought it up. The fact that, when you talk about 1.5 degrees, it doesn't resonate with people. They just don't know what it is. The grassroots. If the banks don't know, what else do the person in the street? They would have no clue what it means. So that awareness is key, and that awareness is then translated into action. But that action needs to be translated into a being right? And I think, Mengyu, you brought it up yesterday. I mean, even just now with the Tesla, the example of the Tesla, where you will normalize sustainability within ourselves, that it just comes naturally to you, and you're not necessarily doing it for the good of the planet, but you're doing it because it enhances your own lifestyle. And that is something that we would need to. So I'm very conscious. Sorry, you want to say something?
I think Tesla is a bad example.
Well, okay. I mean, you seem to be using Tesla a lot, but yeah, maybe the Japanese, is a better example.
Why I say it's a bad example, because not everyone can afford Tesla,
yeah.
right? So I think that's a bad example. I think there are many very good examples, even with a deposit refund scheme, where you put a deposit on the bottle, and when you return the bottle, you get. I think that is really, to me, humanizing it. And in a lot of European countries, when that is practiced, you see that being practiced almost on an automatic default level. People don't need to think about this. And they practice it. So that I think that's a more relevant example. I'm just careful about the Tesla example.
Thank you for correcting that. But the two things that they all brought up, it's the thing about you don't think about it anymore. It becomes so natural, all right? And this is also part of lifelong learning, and that is you're constantly learning and you're constantly putting it into practice. Now, I'm very conscious that we're short of time. 1.5 minutes each. What are your key takeaways for the audience to think about? What are the things that you want the audience to walk away with when they leave this discussion in a bit? Fariel?
Oh, wow.
The mic, yeah.
Okay, so I guess I think every step matters. And beginning with learners, I think before we can actually empower learners, we need to empower our teachers. So it's, I'll stop here, but to empower our learners to change their behaviors, we first need to, empower our teachers and explain to them why this is important. They need to be convinced and they need to believe. And so I'll stop here. And just one more thing. It's not just foundational skills like learning to read and learning to write or literacy that's important anymore. Now it's the soft skills that have become really important, and those are values, competencies that learners need to make decisions, to be proactive citizens, and to make a difference in this world.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Before I answer that question, I would like to share just not chat. I would just to share one of our project in Royal Belum, where we actually humanizing it, where we change our syllabus to teach the indigenous people using 10 basic syllabus. When I was teaching you that. Syllabus number 1, know myself. Syllabus number 2, know my family. Syllabus number 3, know my food. Syllabus number 4, know my community, my jungle, etc., etc. And based on that, we also introduce, instead of just numeracy, literacy, we also introduce environmental education that we learn from them, where how do you track, know that is actually the highway for the tigers. So we introduce bushcraft so that these children, when they grow up, they may not go to school, but they will be part of the feeder program for them to become forest rangers to protect the Malaysian forests from the poachers and hopefully increase the number of our Malayan tiger.
Great.
With that,
Great.
I would like to share one slide. This is taken at COP29. The first 2 pictures are from the same bin. You can see that glassware, but inside there's no glass inside. And this is even worse. This is taken right after a panel session. Thank God it's not here. It's one of the global north, where all the coffee cups are left on the grounds, and I saw this man picking up. Nobody else did, but this man, he was picking up all over to throw in the right bin. So I applaud that too.
Yeah.
I shall not name who the person is. We here, if we see any coffee cup, please do something about it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I think that's a very powerful visual. It reminds us of what we should be doing, what we're not. However, I'd like to point out that that one man is a step forward. It just takes that one person. Rather than blaming everybody else, it does take that one person to acknowledge that that person has moved forward. Sergey, over to you.
So on takeaways, I would say, education is a powerful but definitely underutilized tool for climate action. It's taking us a long time to have this conversation. If we really want to see change in terms of policies, bold policies being implemented, we need to invest in the people that need to support them and the people that need to implement them. And for that to happen, even though I didn't mention it earlier, it's critical that we also protect education. Since 2022, we've seen over 400 million students being affected by school closures, something that you referenced earlier too. Even when the schools stay open, high temperatures impact the students' abilities to actually concentrate and so on. And what's frustrating about this is there are simple things that we can do to protect education. In the Choosing Our Future report, we estimated that for less than $20 per child, we would be able to implement a lot of policies to actually protect their learning and protect the benefits that we're discussing here today. So a first step to seeing the positive impacts that we've discussed today for climate action and to actually protecting the children's right to education is to invest more in it. But let me stop there.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. That's a good call to action that we need to protect the children's rights, and therefore people need to start thinking about investing more. Right, Meng-Yi, over to you.
Yep. So I met a youth from the Pacific Islands yesterday, and she told me that she cried 3 times over the last few days. So eco-anxiety is real. And my reply to her, like I shared yesterday, that I'm confident that we will survive. Humans are really innovative and really resilient, and we have survived against all odds in the past when faced with overpopulation, with resource scarcity. We survive with innovation, and I believe we will survive climate change. That being said, not everyone will survive. We will survive. Some of us will survive. And our actions today will determine who survives, right? And how many people survives. So there are real impacts on what we do today that will impact future generations. And I would like everyone to think about that. Yeah.
Powerful words. I think who survives? A lot of vulnerable groups that need to survive may not survive this. So we will need to think very carefully about that. Jeff.
Yes. So from my side, I think it's important to be to have clarity. So clarity is very important on why we are doing what we're doing in education and capacity building. We need to be able to measure the effectiveness. How does the action, the training that we provide translates into concrete action? That's extremely important because we're investing so much, not only time, but also financial resources in it. And the last point I would like to share is that education alone is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You need concerted actions and policies to come hand in hand, and it's important to continue to learn from each other. Different countries have different experiences. Similarly, for central banking world as well, we can learn from each other. And I would like to end with with a Malay proverb: "Bersatu teguh, bercerai roboh."
That's right.
Meaning that we need to be united and to work in concert. And this is, I think, at a global level, a very important cooperation. Multilateral cooperation needs to be sustained.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much to the panel members. I'm not going to summarize because we've been summarizing as we went along. However, the key takeaways here are things that I think are very important for us to ponder about, to think about. So with that in mind, perhaps we can open the floor for 2 questions. If there are any questions, burning questions that you may want to ask. Yes? Thank you.
Thank you for the good, rich conversation that has taken place here. Now, infusing sustainability as a way of lifestyle, I think I take it from the colleague here. But again, we are in COP29. One of the key issues under discussion is means of implementation. We talk of education, behavior change, all this doing, but the means of implementation to enrich all the way from the learners to educators to teachers. How is this conversation and the partnership that goes around the rich panel that then we are having? The city prospect is an issue that as we talk of the behavior change that has just been pointed in the picture we have seen, then it boils down to how we bring the perspective of sustainability in our cities. And from Kenyan perspective, one of the programs that we are trying to galvanize support and partnership around is on building climate resilient with the urban poor. When we talk of the urban poor space, how the policies are also entrenched towards looking at how the whole spectrum is looked into. And so we would talk more, but because of time, I just want to draw the attention of the issue of means of implementation and the power of partnership to take this into action. Thank you.
I mean, it's an important point. I don't think we can do it justice in a minute. What I would say is that that is precisely why we're having this conversation. I think if we want to see those policies that are being discussed being implemented, we have to think about how to actually empower the individuals that will have to do it. So in the case of Kenya, I know the First Lady is very keen on pushing for green skilling, and there is a lot of efforts to empower the Kenyan population to ensure that they can actually implement the targets that President Ruto has outlined. There is also a lot of different initiatives within Kenya that are trying to build resilience. One that I was mentioning to Jeff earlier was about the use of parametric insurance in the northern counties, so in Garissa and Turkana, where if a shock happens, there is a payout to the families to ensure that they're able to cope with the shocks, and particularly relevant for education because a lot of the droughts that happen in the northern counties close down schools. So that will ensure that children keep attending school even when there is a shock. This is being implemented by IRC and FCDO, but the World Bank is supporting in other ways. I work on Kenya, so I'm happy to discuss more.
If I can add a point, sharing what Malaysia is doing, is a whole nation approach is very important. The people, private and public sector collaboration is important. All of the project that Alam is involved, it involves multiple collaboration. The Royal Belum, the forest that I mentioned, where we're helping the indigenous people, there are 11 partners involved, from smallest NGO to the biggest like European Union. We have public listed companies, we have academia, federal government, state government, all come in together to help us on this. And that is not the only one. We have others in Terengganu, etc. I think PPP is most important. And again, it starts from the heart.
All right. Would any one of you like to add on to that? No? All right. One last question. Anyone else? Yes, Yazid.
Thank you so much. Just a quick question. Now there's an upsurge of ESG interest, by the private sector, and I'm working in the university as Surin. There's a lot of interest by the private sector to come to the university saying that we need different competencies as we're addressing this. And do you have any opinion on how university should transform in terms of, our curriculum and the way that we teach and all that in the light of ESG, but also in terms of climate action?
Farial, would you like to handle this one? Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's a really important question, and universities have a very important role in research, conducting research, but also developing courses around specific thematic issues and generating evidence to enable policymakers to make informed decisions. So universities have a very important role in this whole process of education for sustainable development. We had the regional meeting for education for sustainable development this year in July at Sunway University. We had Jeffrey Sachs coming in and participating in the keynote. But one of the key takeaways was policymakers, we need to build that bridge between science, evidence, the new discoveries that science is making that impact climate action and climate change, and the policymakers. So I think universities can help build those bridges by generating evidence, but also having seminars between diverse stakeholders, just like you mentioned, to raise issues around, pertinent issues, and stay ahead of the curve. So that aspect of analysis and foresight universities can offer. So there are many ways, but maybe somebody else.
I think Mengi has something to say.
If I can share what Malaysia is doing at Ministry of Higher Learning, MOHI is now looking at 10 shifts in education at higher learning, from the current state of what students aspire to the learner aspiration. This also includes some of the game changers, the like of from structured education to unstructured education. We mentioned about just now the flexible and long learning. So, Doc, if you're interested to know this, I can share, because there is already a committee that has been set up to look into this.
Right. I think the ministry has done a lot of restructuring where education is concerned, and they're very, very much interested in what they call personalized learning that leads to the betterment of the community as well as the society, as well as what they call care, that focuses on the care of the community. Mengi, you were going to say something.
So 2 points. One, I think at the Singapore Environment Council, we work a lot with companies and especially small, medium enterprises. And in my opinion, when you talk about sustainability to them, they often find it very complex. So I think the key is really how to make this really approachable and simplifying it in a way that they can easily incorporate it in their business operation. So that's one. Number two, I think I seen one of my classmates just walked in. We did a master's program in the States, and I love the program primarily because it's taught by practitioners.
Yes.
And it's really, there's a bit of academic in it, but I think a lot of it's practical, and I think that's absolutely important. I'm sorry, but maybe we shouldn't be getting professors to be teaching sustainably. We should have a mix.
No, I absolutely agree with you.
Mix practitioners involved in this also. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. It is something that we have been discussing for many times. This is why we have professors of practice in the universities. This is something that we've looked at. This is why we look at open science, where we share from the industry as well, a lot of practices. So no apologies necessary. I was just going to say, we live in an ivory tower, but it's time we came down, and we have been walking down, to meet the practitioners. So it's there.
Yes.
Last words from you.
Yes, very quickly. So I think it will be a dream. I think if universities can mainstream climate across your different disciplines, and make the workforce that goes into central banking, that goes into financial regulation, climate ready. Because if you do that, then we don't have to do it. And I think that's really helpful.
Okay, thank you. I think this is a very important point to end on, right? Where we provide that awareness, the knowledge, the skills, as you mentioned, but also the resilience in terms of the structures, in terms of the education that is in place, and then translate that into doing. You yourself just said, practitioners. Translate that into doing, experiential, and that leads on perhaps to being, as you said, that being has to be part and parcel of our mindset to become sustainable, in the future. So with that, I'd like to thank all 5 of the panelists. Thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your insights, and for being, brave enough to say blunt things. So thank you so much to the audience as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. Surin, and all panelists for an engaging session. We do have a group photo, but firstly, let's have a picture with the panelists, if the photographer could go. And for the audience, please just stay seated. Panelists, you can all stand for a picture. Okay, now let's have one with the audience. If the panelists could just make your way down. And then for all the audience, please just stand up and let's squeeze in together. And then just look at the photographer over there.
Where? Oh, there.
Thank you so much, everyone. Our next session begins at 11:30. A panel discussion on community resilience, why it takes a village to make a difference. I'll see you later.